We often look to the past to understand ourselves. Tonight, we turn our attention to the year 1897 and the solemn story of William Guldensuppe. It's a case that reminds us that behind historical records are real people whose lives were irrevocably changed by the events that transpired. This is their story, as best as it can be told. On June 26, 1897, a group of boys swimming in New York's East River made a horrifying discovery. They found a burlap sack wrapped in oilcloth and tied with rope. Curious, they dragged it ashore, where they uncovered its grisly contents: the headless, limbless torso of a powerfully built man. This discovery was the first piece of a gruesome puzzle that would ignite a citywide manhunt, fuel a sensational newspaper war, and expose a dark tale of passion and betrayal. In the initial days of the investigation, the victim was simply the nameless man from the river. The police, led by Captain Arthur Carey, were faced with the immense challenge of identifying a body that had been deliberately stripped of its most recognizable features. In a move that highlighted the era's different sensibilities, the torso was put on public display at the city morgue. Thousands of curious and concerned citizens filed past the remains, hoping to provide a name. The city's newspapers dubbed it the Headless Mystery, offering large cash rewards for any information. The key to the man's identity, however, would be found not in his missing face, but on his skin. A physician recognized a rare and distinctive skin condition on the torso, which, along with the man's powerful muscular build, allowed for a positive identification. The victim was William Guldensuppe. With a name came a history. William Guldensuppe was a 36-year-old German immigrant who worked as a masseur and attendant at a popular Turkish bath in the city. He was known for his impressive physique and his quiet, almost reclusive nature. For some time, he had been living in a boarding house in Manhattan, run by a midwife named Augusta Knack. It was an open secret that the two were lovers. Mrs. Knack was a woman with a complicated past. She was separated from her husband and had a reputation in her community for being a shrewd and determined individual. The relationship between the masseur and the midwife appeared, on the surface, to be a stable, if unconventional, domestic arrangement. The police investigation into Guldensupp's life quickly uncovered a critical complication in his relationship with Augusta Knack. She had recently taken a new, younger lover, a handsome and charismatic barber named Martin Thorne. Thorne had moved into the same social circle as Knack and Guldensuppe, and a volatile love triangle had formed. Investigators learned that Guldensuppe, the older and more established partner, was becoming an obstacle to the passionate new affair between Knack and Thorne. With this discovery, the police had a powerful and timeless motive for murder: jealousy. The focus of the investigation narrowed to the two lovers who stood to gain the most from William Guldensuppe's disappearance. Detectives soon learned that Augusta Knack had recently rented a small, isolated cottage in Woodside, Queens, a then rural area far from her Manhattan home. When police arrived at the seemingly tranquil property, they found what they were looking for. Although the cottage had been scrubbed clean, a meticulous examination revealed damning evidence. Dark stains had soaked deep into the wooden floorboards, and spatters were found on the walls. Chemical tests confirmed the stains were human blood. The quiet cottage, rented under a false name, was not a lover's retreat. It was the scene of the crime. Police now believe that William Guldensuppe had been lured to this location and murdered within its walls. The Guldensuppe case coincided with the peak of yellow journalism, a period of fierce competition between the newspaper empires of William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. Hearst's New York Journal and Pulitzer's New York World seized upon the murder, turning it into a national sensation. They deployed armies of reporters, hired their own private detectives, and published every lurid detail, rumor, and speculation they could find. Their sensationalist headlines and graphic illustrations both horrified and captivated the public. This intense media pressure undoubtedly spurred on the police investigation, but it also transformed a human tragedy into a form of public entertainment, forever shaping the legacy of the case. Under the combined pressure of the police investigation and the relentless media scrutiny, Augusta Knox's composure began to crumble. After hours of intense interrogation, she broke down and confessed. She told police that Martin Thorne had killed William Guldensuppe in a fit of jealous rage at the woodside cottage. But her confession went further, into horrifying detail. She admitted that after the murder, she and Thorne had carried Guldensuppe's body into the cottage's bathroom. There, using knives and a saw, they spent hours dismembering the corpse in the bathtub. Her chilling, matter-of-fact account of wrapping the body parts and methodically disposing of them in the East River provided the police with the final, gruesome pieces of the puzzle. With Knack's confession secured, a nationwide manhunt was launched for Martin Thorne, who had fled New York shortly after the murder. Acting on a tip, police tracked him to Chicago, where he was found living under an assumed name. When confronted, Thorne also confessed to his involvement in the crime. However, his version of events attempted to shift the primary blame onto his lover. He portrayed Augusta Knack not as a mere accomplice, but as the manipulative mastermind who had planned the murder and goaded him into carrying it out. He claimed he had acted at her behest, a pawn in her deadly scheme to eliminate her former lover. Both conspirators were now in custody, each pointing the finger at the other. The subsequent trials of Augusta Knack and Martin Thorne were among the most sensational legal spectacles of the era. The courtroom was packed daily with reporters and the public, all eager to hear the sordid details of the love triangle murder. Seeking to avoid the death penalty, Augusta Knack pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter and was sentenced to prison. The main event was the trial of Martin Thorne for first-degree murder. His defense attorneys argued passionately that he was a weak-willed man who had fallen under the spell of a wicked and domineering woman. They painted Augusta Knack as a modern-day Lady Macbeth, the true architect of the crime. The prosecution, however, presented the overwhelming evidence of Thorne's direct involvement, from the blood in the cottage to his own confession. The jury was not swayed by the defense's portrayal of Martin Thorne as a manipulated victim. They found him guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death. On August 1, 1898, Martin Thorne was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison. Augusta Knack served 9 years of her sentence before being released on parole, disappearing into obscurity. The Guldensuppe-Knack case remains a landmark in the history of American crime. It stands as a chilling tale of passion and brutality from the Gilded Age, But its lasting legacy is as a powerful example of how the new force of yellow journalism could turn a police investigation into a national spectacle, forever blurring the line between news and entertainment. Thank you for spending this time with us. Reflecting on these past events is a way of remembering the individuals involved and the impact their stories had on their communities. If you have any thoughts on today's case, we invite you to share them respectfully in the comments below. We hope you will join us again for our next true crime case.